Hello, and welcome back to another panel here at Ink and Panels. And for this panel, we're talking about translating a script into a comic. You've heard from a wide range of comic book professionals today, and anybody will tell you one of the best feelings in doing this process is once that script gets turned into the art. And once you get the art married with the words, you now have this amazing story that you can share with others. But a lot of people, we don't really talk about the process and the difficulty that it is actually translating someone's written work through your artistic style. So today with me in this chat, I have three phenomenal artists who are going to talk about their process, who are going to talk about their interpretation of how they translate scripts and a whole bunch of other stuff within the manga comic book scene. So without further ado, gentlemen, we'll go first starting with DJ, then Ayinde, then Jesse. Introduce yourselves to the audience.
Hello, my name is DJ Kirkland. I'm a professional comic book artist, and I've been working in the industry for about 10 years. I've worked both on the creative side, like drawing and writing and illustrating comics, and I also work in comics publishing as well. It has been a whirlwind of a career. I can't believe it's already been 10 years. I created the graphic novel, The Black Mage. It was co-written by myself and my partner, Daniel Barnes. He's an incredible writer. Some of y'all might know him from his work with Sonic and the Scrapnik Island series. So he's really big in the Sonic space. So if you're familiar with that, you might already be familiar with a little bit of our work. And I'm working on a solo graphic novel that I am both writing and illustrating that is coming out in 2027.
All right. Yeah, my name's Ayinde Hall. I am the artist and writer for Blade Titans. I am the artist for God Punch, and both of those titles are under a studio that I co-founded called Studio Maho. We do manga and we also do animation. So we've been working on those two titles simultaneously. I've got some other stuff in the tank that I've been working on as a writer and as an artist. There's possibly a one-shot that I should be releasing sometime this year. I'm hoping to get it out before DreamCon 2025 this year. So we'll see how that goes. And then we've also been, developing some original animation to go with God Punch. So.
Hi, my name is Jesse Wilson, or Red F Manga, and I am the creator of Golden Mist, which is probably my most popular series right now. It already has volume 1 that's out on lots of bookstores and stuff, and sold out on Amazon, etc. So genuinely thankful for the community that I have on that. And then after that, I'm working on another story for Viz Media called Phantom Shift. And yeah, that's pretty much who I am. That I'm just an author, not as special as you guys, But, yeah.
Oh, you stop
no,
it.
You're just much as integral to this process as the rest of us.
Right,
so do not sell yourself short.
Don't sell yourself short at all.
It is I think I can speak for everybody in the room that having a book with Viz is kind of a big deal, because I think all of us grew up reading manga at the Barnes & Noble, Books A Millions, wherever, and reading so many titles from Viz, where there have been like Naruto, Tenchi Muyo, Inuyasha, Ranma, like the list goes on and on. So like I imagine that it's such a full circle moment for you to be able to have a book published with them. Like that's like a dream come true for like any nerd.
100%.
Yeah.
Even Golden Mist, and you know what I mean? Like I never really imagined me having volumes. I was never really like the plan at first, but Golden Mist became something that I never thought I would imagine. So obviously I'm so happy that that's the next step and that people support me in any way, honestly. But yeah, I guess that's just me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
don't downplay it.
Right.
That's amazing. Yeah, don't sell yourself short, please. Please don't do that. But yeah, that's amazing.
And if anything, it's a testament and it's a good starting point for this panel. A lot of the creators, a lot of the people watching these creators on screen throughout all day are, high schoolers, college students, or maybe first-time storytellers. And it can be really intimidating to think of the journey that you're going to go on. Sometimes you have a lot of big dreams and you're not really quite sure how to make that something tangible that, eventually you want to give to other people. So the fact that, DJ, of course, is a veteran in the game. He's been here for some years. Studio Maho is still pretty young, but the accomplishments that they've made, and as well as yourself, Red, like never sell yourself short. It is truly amazing what you've been able to do, what we've been able to do in the community. So encouragement, guys. Literally, you can do anything you want to do.
Absolutely, 100%.
Exactly.
Getting into some of the meat and potatoes of today while we're here. Of course, each of these amazing artists have done what I consider probably one of the most probably the most important part of the comic book process, but also probably one of the most difficult. And that's taking the script that, if you are working in a 2-man team, your writer is providing to you, or if you're just one person, one guy, one gal, one they, them, your script that you wrote, actually translating that into the art that people will visualize for this thing called sequential art. And speaking of, I think, I know this will definitely apply for you, DJ, as well as you, Ayinde. But so this will be more towards them, but I still would love to hear your thoughts on this. How is it taking someone else's ideas, someone else's storyline, and then interpreting it through your style? What is that? How do you kind of approach that process?
I would say that I've been like extremely blessed to work with creative partners that are primarily writers who share a lot of the same interests and the same like backgrounds of like the stories that we're telling together. So working with Danny for Black Mage was like a match made in heaven. Like we both have like the same frame of reference. We both grew up in the Toonami era. We both grew up reading manga in Barnes and Noble and Books a Million, what have you. And we like a lot of the same stuff. So whenever he was like workshopping a scene with me for Black Mage, we would always like kind of have like a nod to like a reference point of something, just as like a frame of reference to work from. And Danny is really good as a writer of like being very descriptive in his panel descriptions and his page descriptions of what's going on in the comic. So I fortunately have been blessed to work with people that are very, very, very clear with what they want to see, but at the same time allowing me to kind of like do my thing. So there's always like, this is kind of what I was thinking, but I'm gonna let you as the artist like take the wheel and go from there. And whatever makes the most sense, we'll talk about it. But I was in a situation where I had a lot of trust with my writer. So I think that's at the forefront, is trust, and trusting your artist to be able to deliver that vision that you've already written, and for the artist as well to trust the writer that they're going to do their best to make sure that whatever their ideas are trying to communicate, you can actually put on the page.
Yeah, honestly, to piggyback off of that, that's kind of been my situation with working with Patrick, my writer and business partner for God Punch. So when we first started, and it's been like, it's always like a learning process with someone new. You kind of learn how they write, and especially if, like, for us, we were both very much amateurs when we first started. Patrick didn't have as much experience writing out a script format. So when the first few chapters that we worked on, his descriptions were a little too dense for translating it into like one panel, right? So we would say, oh, this chapter is going to be 20 pages, right? And it ends up being 40 because you cut the descriptors. It's like watching a movie, right? And then you're like, when you put it together in your head, it's like actually 3 scenes or 3 panels, and so it's just progressively gets longer and longer. So now we've worked together so long, we figured out, like, okay, well, this is how he's like, okay, this is how I have to write. I understand I don't need to be as descriptive. I can let him kind of have some leeway there, some creative freedom to draw the scene how I see it. And so it's been fun. It's been a good process, piggybacking off of each other, and it helps that I'm a writer as well. So I can kind of like, we go over and edit each chapter before I even translate it, and that way we know the actual page count before I actually put the pen.
And I was just about to ask you, Red, how do you approach? I know that you're a one-man tank over here. How do you approach translating some of your ideas from a script into your art, or do you actually work from a script, or is it kind of you make the art as your brain is kind of building out the scenes?
So for me, honestly, I definitely do the first thing in a script beforehand, completely script, like the whole entire chapter or whatever the project is, I completely script that out. Obviously, when it comes to scripting things and putting it on page, sometimes there has to be changes because, you know, it just doesn't usually work that way. You know what I mean? Some things that are that hit on the pages and stuff like that on the script doesn't really work when it comes to panel layouts and stuff like that, or even the emotion that you were originally trying to show within the story. It just doesn't translate. So yeah, obviously there is room for changing, but I feel like it's definitely an interesting process, and I feel like people definitely need to hear more about how it isn't easy to do so, because like at least when I first started out doing that exact thing, like I feel like that was definitely a problem for me, because you know I always wondered, oh, why didn't this work out? Why didn't the theme what is it, you know, show within the story, or why didn't this scene hit? You know what I mean? Is because I had to understand that there's a difference between the script and the paper, or yeah, if that made any sense. But yeah. Yeah, sorry.
No, that makes complete sense. And I feel like that's hopefully something that our viewers are picking up through today, is that in the process of sequential art, I think I've said it before today, it is not simply just taking a concept and turning it into a comic book. It is a team effort. Even if it's a one-man team, you have to do, there is a process to this. There is a science and a math to this. People go to school for sequential art. When you are making comics, you need to start out with a script. You need to have something to refer to before you start building your art. So yeah, go ahead.
I was actually going to say another thing, right? And another problem that I hope people do learn when translating it is that usually, because it's a script, it's mainly dialogue. And because it's dialogue, you can kind of get, you know, wrapped in having too much of that and showing, not telling, if that makes any sense. So yeah, definitely there's definitely a balance to it for sure, because you never want to have too much of that, because that's what kind of the best stories have. They mainly show and they tell, but you know, there's just a balance to it. So that's something that you also got to learn when scripting as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Like writing a script for a comic is not the same thing as writing a script for like the stage or even for screen, right? Whether that be for film or television. The medium lends itself to it. They're both visual mediums, right? But the thing that I think that makes comics very special is that you do have this visual component, and you have I'm not going to try to go too deep into comic theory. Right?
No, please go. You're good.
I love this stuff so much. It's understanding like what's like when you're working on a singular page, right? It's like, when I go into a script, like what am I trying to communicate to the viewer on this particular page? What's the most important thing that I want the reader to take away from this? Is it like a big reveal of like a very big emotional beat, or reveal of a new character or a villain or whatever, or is it finally like the payoff shot from like a big battle that's been building up over the last couple of pages? So what information is the most important to convey to the reader that makes the most sense, that's the most effective? And so much, and to your point about like showing and not telling, when you start writing your anime villain like monologues, just cut them. Just cut them down to a couple of sentences if possible, because the last thing you want to do is have a wall of text covering an entire beautiful illustration on a comic book page. So it's really about finding the balance of how much dialogue to give and what am I going to show the reader versus actually having to tell them. So finding that balance of showing versus telling, and just having it written out plainly in dialogue for people, it's its own art form. It's its own beast of trying to figure out what that perfect balance is and what scenes call for how much dialogue versus how much art to show. It's a delicate dance of how to like make it the most impactful with however many pages that you have.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's something I've been still working on myself. Is
Same.
you know, like you end up with a wall of text, and you're like, that's way too much dialogue, man. Like, I think the first chapter of God Punch, that was something that we some feedback that we received from some industry professionals that we talked to when it first dropped, is that, you know, you got way too much text. You don't need your characters talking this much. You know what I'm saying? Like, let the artwork tell the story a little bit more. And like you said, you know, when you have too much dialogue, you end up covering up a lot of the artwork, trying to squeeze it all into the page. And then if you shrink the text down, then they can't read it, right? So there's definitely definitely that balance, finding the balance between how much text to put on the page versus, just letting the artwork speak for itself.
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples, I don't know if you guys have read Bakuman by Obata and Oba. They did Death Note, and
Yeah.
it's a whole process of basically working for Shueisha, right?
Yep. Yep.
And one of their rivals did a whole chapter with no dialogue during the series.
Yep.
And that was kind of like a bomb drop, basically, right? Like he just let the entire chapter speak for itself with no words. So you can do stuff like that. I mean, there's no rules really, but there is definitely a balance to be had, right? If you are going to, be writing a lot of dialogue. So
absolutely, and comics are a communication tool, right? It's about communicating whatever it is that you're trying to communicate to your reader, right? So first and foremost, right, like you have the script. You should be able to a certain degree, of course. It's not going to work this way every time, because I think certain scripts, there's certain elements that call for the text and the art to go hand in hand together for it to like really make sense. But a person should be able to kind of like look at a glance of what's happening on the page and kind of understand what's going on to a certain degree with just the art alone, right? Because that's a testament to great writing and to great storytelling from the artist. Like being able to combine those two things together and with no dialogue is a comic that's in full pantomime is a huge undertaking to do. It's very, very hard to get that and to convey everything that you're trying to convey without any dialogue at all. And if you can do that, you're truly a master at the craft. Honestly, that is something that I'm always striving for, being able to communicate what's going on without having seen any of the script at all. It's hard to, right? But yeah, it's comics is the written text and the art going hand in hand, and that's what makes the medium so special.
Yeah, I agree with that. And usually when it comes to the specific story that you're making, majority of the time it really doesn't need dialogue, because the dialogue is always second to the art majority of the time. Obviously the dialogue does, improve the story, of course, but I always think of it, at least when I create manga pages and etc., I always think of the art first, and if the dialogue is necessary to that page, then I'll have to do that, you know what I mean? But
no, absolutely. I think this is such a fun panel to be in. Earlier yesterday, as of the recording of today's panel, I did the panel with the writers, which was so fun. And on the writing side, when we think about before the art actually makes it to the artist table, there's a lot of thought process about how we kind of visualize the scenes in our heads, how we have to, like, okay, we want the scene to be impactful. How much words needs to go in here? So coming up with little things like there shouldn't be more than 25 words in there, or how do we show and don't tell? How do we convey that we want a cough to come across the page? How do we convey that we want these loud bangs and booms and bams to come across the page? It truly is like this giving you my brain, if you will, giving you my brain. It's like, here, decipher it, turn it into something wonderful. And of course, if you have a really good team, it happens like magic every time. A second question, speaking of kind of just working with a writer, what are some qualities in a good writer or a good writing team partner that you're looking for as an artist?
Definitely my same mindset, you know what I mean? I feel like, obviously, I feel like it's kind of a pro and a con in my personal opinion, but I think that it's very specific when it comes to stories that I don't think any other person can mimic. But that's just because, I guess, of who I am, obviously. But I would probably say that's the one thing I would want from someone that would help me on my story or my manga or something like that in the future, is for them to have the same type of mindset and the same goals on what I'm trying to translate to the audience that reads my work, when it comes to taking things in, what to learn from these stories. I want somebody that could help me make that clear for the audience. So yeah, that's what I'd want personally.
Yeah, for me, I think me and Patrick just kind of ended up meshing well together because we kind of write a little similar in some shape, way, and form. And that's why he's my co-writer for Blade Titans. So even though I that's like my story. I had him come on, and it's kind of natural. And when you write with someone, you want it to kind of feel that way, right? You don't want to feel like you're butting heads every time you know, are trying to put things on the paper. And if you have, like you said, a similar mindset of how you want things to flow, if they can match visually, because even if we're only writers, right, you still have kind of a visual of what things look like in your head and how you
Yeah.
process scenes. So if they're the way that they process scenes in their head is kind of similar, that helps you guys mesh a little bit better when it comes to translating that script over to the visuals. I think one of my favorite things about working with like Patrick is we both think in kind of like movie format essentially when we're doing our scenes. So like, how would this play out if somebody was filming it, right? And there was no dialogue yet. How would it play out in your head, right? Instead of it being sequential, block it out in like a full out scene, like a film scene.
Yeah, I definitely I agree with everything that's already being said here. I echo this often on the internet. I'm like, comics is a team sport. It is a relationship. It is a partnership. It is something that like you work that it ends up being a better product when you have other people on the team with you, where you're not just like nothing's ever created in a bubble, right? So for me, when I'm looking for a writing partner, I'm looking for somebody that understands going into this that it's going to be a partnership, that we're here to work on this together. We have the same goals in mind. We want this to be the best book that it could possibly be, which I think anybody going into the situation is going to approach it that way because we both have our reputations to lose if we don't put our best foot forwards, right? So going into any project, we know that this is a partnership. This is a team project. We're in this together. Open lines of communication. I'm a double texter, so I'm like, I will hit you with back-to-back text messages of what I'm thinking about, like if it comes to the story, or like, oh, maybe it's an idea for a scene here, or I've done some sketches for a character design. What do you think? How does this work with the narrative? Does this fit with like the tone of the book, of the total vibe of the book? Does it make sense for whatever it is, the kind of story that we're trying to tell? Just open lines of communication, understanding that it's a partnership, and being open to feedback, because I'm a sponge when it comes to feedback for stuff like this, because I know it's not coming from a place of malicious intent. It's coming from a place of wanting to make the book the best that it can be. So just being open and receptive to feedback or criticism when it comes to the work, because ultimately we're trying to get to the same goal of the work being incredible.
I absolutely love that, especially after speaking with the writer side. That communication is absolutely key in this creative process for certain. Another aspect of that the script translating into the art is actually just your genuine interpretation of the words that you are reading. From you guys' perspectives, how do you guys determine how you are going to interpret the words, especially if it's something that's a little bit more ambiguous, instead of like so she walked into the door this particular way, or he sat down in the chair? How do you go about interpreting the more kind of ambiguous ways that a writer will provide you a story?
I would say when the things that I like in comics, a lot. I mean, you see this in movies and in animation as well, where it's not just always medium shots of the characters, right? It's like sometimes you see like it's a shot of like the hand opening the door, or it's them like coming into the seat mid action, or something like that. That kind of takes you away from just it being like character work focused. It's kind of building that environment and showing that space to kind of give the viewer an idea of like where we're at in the story. I love kind of taking those moments and like either enhancing them with like an action shot of like not necessarily like the character acting, but like them like pulling up something or holding on a piece of paper or a cup or handing the character something. When I was working on this project for DC last year, we were working on we worked on a story for a template story for DC Pride, and the crux of the story was about them being at this kind of like multicultural, multi like alien life form like food festival, right? So it's a mixture of humans and aliens from all different walks of life, but the food kind of still feels very similar and like human, I guess. And I noticed that in the script there wasn't like a call to like really highlight the food in the story. It's like, oh, this is a huge component of that. So there needs to be those like fun, like glamour shots of the food that they're eating. We need to see that. We need to kind of give them like the food wars effect of like the focus, like glamour shot of the churros that they're eating, of the beef jerky, of the desserts that they're having. Like those things are important because it adds flavor to that world. It makes it feel more real, like more lived in and more realized, because you kind of get to see like, oh, this is the type of food that they eat in this world. We otherwise we wouldn't have known that. And but like while I found that to be a very important part of the story, like ultimately it's a story about like friendship and like being like an outsider was kind of the overall plot of the story. But the B plot for me is like showing off the food that they're eating throughout all the 10 pages. We have to give a little moment for the food. So focusing on moments that are kind of like not necessarily the exact mainline plot of the story, but like I guess kind of like the B plot of like a story is just as important to me.
I feel like for me, right, I think one of the main things that I personally like in, comics and manga is the actions that specific characters like, show to differentiate themselves from other characters. So like if there's like a scene or this is like some type of mystery story and there's a character that is suspicious or they're like, on edge because they're getting watched, they're being watched or stalked or something like that. There's like things that they would probably do, like their arms or hands would be shaking, or they would be, looking all around themselves. They would kind of show that they're more exhausted based on the actions that they do. And just, there's all like, all types of different characters that do different things. You know what I mean? That is the one thing that I actually did have to learn about this new story that I'm working with, is that I had to find ways to differentiate these characters from one another, not separate from the dialogue and, the designs, show that they're their own characters that do their own things, that have their own, ways of moving around in the world. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I feel like that is very important. Uh, Definitely just showing the smaller details within those panels and stuff like that, and et cetera. And especially, I would assume, like in novels, it would be even harder to do that as well. But yeah, that's my opinion, though.
Yeah, I agree. I think like you both were saying, it's you get that descriptor, right, of whatever's going on in the scene, and it's up to you to make it not boring, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because when somebody reads it, it's like, okay, well, they're going to have their own interpretation of what it looks like. So you need to make it as much your own as it is the author's descriptor, right, of what's going on in the scene. Going back to like making it seem like a movie, right? Like make it cinematic, man. Like the best movies have amazing shots that tell their own pieces of the story without there
Mhm.
being any dialogue. It's not just like you said, character studies. You got waist up shots the entire time. Everything's front facing. There's no angles. There's no, close ups of actions being had. That's what makes a story or a comic boring to read. Is if you're not really, there's not really anything unique going on in the scenes, right? So for me, I love those little like um, breaking up sometimes the description into more than just one panel. Sometimes I'll do like, okay, well, they're talking about this, but I feel like there needs to be a transition panel where the character is handing the other character something else, or there's a close up of what's being talked about in the scene. Um, I even have the one shot that I'm working on currently. There's a conversation between two characters, and one of the characters is very like tense and paranoid, and they're in the middle of this like food district, right? There's all kinds of street vendors and whatnot, and one of the characters is basically talking about, I think it's a trap. I think all these bad things are going to happen. Like they're out to get me. That the standard paranoia. Text. And instead of just showing the characters talking throughout the scene, which I feel like that'd just be kind of boring, is when they get to certain points that they're talking about in their conversation, I cut away to the street vendors, right? You've got somebody talking about they're going to get me, and the next scene is somebody at a fish market chopping off a fish's head, something like that, something that ties into the scene, but it's more like metaphorical, right?
Yeah.
I like that. That's
So
actually a really good
Mhm.
thing that you just mentioned. Yeah, I
yeah,
like that.
so
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're building that world that for people to be able to immerse themselves in, right? So you're able to kind of understand that tension, that anxiety that that character is feeling, because it's like you're cutting over to the fisherman, like at the station with the fish, and he's chopping off the head of the fish, where it's kind of building upon that those feelings of anxiety. It's like, what if it's this person? What if it's that
mhm,
person? So it kind of plays on that emotion, while not just outright saying, I'm anxious that somebody's going to get me, and then moving on to the next panel of somebody
mhm,
talking. Like you're using the environment to tell the story for you, which
exactly.
that's exactly what you want in comics.
Absolutely. And speaking of your ability to kind of take some of these more nebulous these more nebulous pieces, or actually drag out some of the text to create more dynamic scenes. Other than the source material or the text, the script that you're interpreting, what other places do you draw inspiration from to create more dynamic scenes?
I would say definitely more manga or just stories that you're mainly inspired by, especially when it comes to the story you're trying to create. For example, my story is Golden Mist is very much inspired by Dragon Ball and early Dragon Ball, so I definitely try to get inspiration from that, or more cooler series that have more dynamic poses and scenes within their stories, like Jujutsu Kaisen or even Kagurabachi or even Superman comics and etc. Try to find inspiration in those type of ways and those type of projects. So yeah, I would say mainly just manga and comics. Yeah, those type of things.
Yeah, for me, like I'm very much like a media person. I love consuming media, whether it be like live action television, movies, games, manga, traditional like Western comics, like all of those things, even music too, right? Like I feel like all those things you can kind of bring into comics in really unique ways. For the book that I'm working on that's coming out in 2027, it's like a queer romance series, and one of my biggest sources of inspiration is actually Insecure by Issa Rae. Like that show is like is such a huge like cultural touch point for me, and like navigating like adulthood and like the and relationships, and like will they won't they of it all, like the ambiguity of like relationships and dating and all of that. And then also reading lots of shoujo manga. Like I'm starting to read Nana over again for the first time. Well, not for the first time, but reading it again since I was like a teenager, and like reading shoujo manga, watching like rom-com movies, stuff like that, to kind of get the idea. Um, Personally, somebody that I study a lot is Rumiko Takahashi, who I think is a master of storytelling, both action and romance at the same time. Like Ranma One Half is a perfect example of a story that has a lot of action, but it's all about the relationships. It's about the romance between Akane and Ranma, and all the other characters. The will they, won't they, those tense moments of like looking at each other longingly, focusing on these big character portraits and the emotions to kind of really convey what that character is feeling. Like, so it's a combination of all of those things that I think can make a really cool comic.
Yeah, you guys both said exactly what I was going to say, which is, any media that you consume can be an inspiration, right?
Yeah.
You watch movies, you watch TV shows, whether they're animated or live action or whatever. All of those are just different forms of storytelling. So you can kind of pick up. For me, I love when I watch something and I'm like, man, that was such a cool shot, or that was the way that they opened the scene was just so cool. I wish I would, I would love to draw something like that.
Yeah.
All of that kind of stuff. But also, like you said, manga as well. You study people who are masters at. Um, for me, more so as an artist than a writer, but from both sides, people that are masters of storytelling in the visual medium, right? How they how they translate their own text into scenes, or vice versa. One of my favorite examples of someone who just we were talking about sound effects and stuff the other day, and there's a I can't remember the name of the person who works on the series. It's a Japanese manga, but it's called, I think, Innocence or Innocent, and it's about the French Revolution. And but what's really cool is sometimes the way that they do their sound effects, or um, you know create weight in a scene is to cut away to something that's completely unrelated to what's happening in the scene. So there's this huge like crashing sound, and the next page is an iceberg falling into the water. Has nothing to do with the scene. But the sound that your brain thinks of when it thinks of an iceberg hitting the water creates the sound effect for you. So there's no actual sound effect on the scene. So there's just like really creative ways to tell your story without, it becoming formulaic or, a little boring. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of the pieces of translation that a lot of people talk about, just actually translating the scene into the panels, or translating, kind of like beat for beat. But a large aspect of the art that a lot of people don't talk about is the lettering, the actual, the boom, the bam, the papa, all those sound effects. And for our viewers who might not be familiar, lettering sometimes is done by the artist themselves, but sometimes the letterer is its own person that does the lettering. But of course, each of you, I know that all of you guys have done lettering. So, and from your perspective, how do you interpret what words become letters, or what in your opinion, what moments do you like, it would really set this off if I added like a big crash? How do you kind of translate those aspects of the text?
Again, I think it's a delicate dance of like trying to figure out like what makes the most sense for the story, right? I think about things like Kill la Kill. I think about things like in all the Shonen Jump titles with like the onomatopoeia of the sound effects, and how they're just as integral to the art as like the drawings of the characters themselves. Like if you think of the page as like a piece of design work, and how that lettering and those sound effects can lead the viewer's eye through the page, like that in and of itself is a completely different and separate skill set, in addition to just being able to draw the moment to moment things that are happening from each panel. I think it kind of depends on like how like sound effects heavy your work is going to be, and being consistent. That's kind of like the hard part, right? It's establishing what that's going to look like throughout the entirety of your book.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. Oh, carry on. You go.
No, I was just gonna agree. I was gonna say like it is kind of like a balance, because if you have too much sound effects on your page, it starts to get cluttered. It can, and I know that there's ways to get around that. Like, there's you could do transparent. You could just do the outlines of the letters and have the artwork showing through the background. It literally is its own skill set, its own kind of artistic design. Like you said, you can use it to lead the viewer's eye through the work. It doesn't necessarily need to be on every page. If you've established that this is what something sounds like, it doesn't necessarily need to be in that in another panel that has that same sound effect. Because then the viewer already kind of has the idea of what it's supposed to sound like in their head. So it is kind of, sometimes it adds to it, and sometimes it's good to take it away and just let the viewer's mind kind of create the sound effect for themselves. So
yeah, you definitely want to give your viewers some time to like have their own interpretation too. Like it's like for them to read the book, it's like they're also going to have their own takeaways from what you've created on the page. So get not like over explaining to the viewer, I think is going to be a detriment to your story. Again, like that's the showing and not telling, the telling and not showing, I guess. Like just talking about it and not just like letting the viewer just like see it for themselves. So it's a delicate dance of trying to figure out how much to give or not give for sound effects and lettering.
I also think it's all about immersion, obviously. Definitely make the scene more believable. Usually when a lot of people read good stories, they kind of put themselves within it, obviously, like you don't want them to be de-immersed by scenes and stuff like that. So if they need the necessary, boom, bam, then you definitely need to add that. For me personally, I guess my journey with that, I work for Shrine Comics, and the boss of Shrine Comics, his name was Jin. He actually was getting on my butt a lot when I first started making manga about that very thing, about fonts and not fonts and etc., but like sound effects and the right placement for it, and wording, because he actually is the letterer for Roboco in Shonen Jump, so he definitely gave me a hard time when I first started out. But I just feel like obviously these things need to make you feel more immersed, and obviously just like you said earlier about making you see through page panel to panel on the page and stuff like that easier. I usually call that the Z effect, and as long as that thing is consistent with that, then your immersion, well, I mean, your immersion will be intact, obviously, but yeah, it just makes it more believable showing the scenes. And sometimes there's even panels where it doesn't matter how good it is. People are kind of confused on what they're really looking at, and those things actually help with that. So yeah, I would say that.
Man, that I love everything about that. Absolutely. Of course, I have to take a moment and give you guys your props. You guys are clearly masters within your craft, or growing masters. I know that everyone always has room to grow, but of course, you guys have been absolutely doing the work and doing amazing work. For the last little bit of this, I just want to take a moment. If you were to give some advice to anybody who is tackling the process of either interpreting someone else's script for the first time, or maybe they're working on their very first story and they're translating their own script into art, what would be some tips that you'd provide them on getting this started?
If you're going to be writing and drawing your own stuff, write and draw stuff that you actually want to draw. It has to be exciting for yourself to want to like get on the page. Like, don't feel like you have to do something like, oh well, like this book does this, and I feel like if like I want my book to be successful, it has to be just like this or whatever. Like you got to make this fun for you. Like ultimately, for me, like I never want to lose that feeling that I had when I was a kid, where I just had like cheap printer paper and I was drawing my own little comics on it. I don't want to lose that excitement and that energy for creating art and creating comics. I never want to lose that. With all the instruction, with the years of education from art school and the years of working in the industry and doing projects for different companies, whether it be for myself or with other publishers, I never want to lose that like childlike excitement of like wanting to tell and make my own stories. Write things that you want to draw. Like ultimately, and if you are gonna draw like big environments and crowd scenes, just know that you're gonna have to draw those. So
yeah, definitely just draw.
If you don't want to draw cars, make a story in a world that doesn't have cars. If you don't want to draw all these skyscrapers, don't draw something that takes place in a city. Or you can challenge yourself to have the comic be an exercise in challenging yourself to like, oh, I want to get better at perspective. I want to get better at drawing environments. I want to get better at drawing complex objects like cars. Like, what is your game plan going into your story? Like, what are the takeaways that you want to come away from the project with once it's done, that you said, I learned how to do X, Y, and Z from making this book. You could also view it as a challenge that way too.
Definitely, at least my goal is for people to take things from the stories that I create, and even if that means challenging myself, I'm 100% capable of doing that. I feel like when it comes to stories, that's kind of what it's all about. It's kind of about the hardships of making it. It's never easy to. I always say that making manga is hard, fun, and stuff like that. And I want people to be inspired by that. I want people to be inspired by somebody that looks like me, making a manga themselves and, putting their stories out there. And for me as a writer, I love challenging myself, which is why Golden Mist is about a story about time travel, because I see that a lot in media, time travel is very confusing. People make it confusing, they over explain it and stuff like that. So I wanted to say, what, why not put my own 2 cents into it, do my own spin on it, and stuff like that, and etc. So there's a lot that you can take from it, but also it's definitely the theme of it. I feel like the theme is like the spine of a story, and that's like the main thing when it comes to being a storyteller, is that people should take away from stories is the theme of that and what you learn from it. It makes you a better person. It made me a better person watching Dragon Ball, One Piece, all the type of stories that I've grown up watching. It made me the person I am today. And a goal as a writer is to do exactly that to other people that are like you. So
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's really, what is your goal coming into being an artist or a writer or both, in creating that story, and what do you want your viewers to take away from it? Because at the end of the day, if you're not successful in doing that, you're not going to feel satisfied with your own work. So that needs to be like the core of what you're trying to do. But it also needs to be like DJ was saying, it needs to be fun, right? You know, if it's not fun, you're not gonna want to do it. It becomes a chore. It becomes, you know, like a job basically. So it's kind of finding the balance of, you know, keeping that core theme alive throughout the story and progressing it forwards, but also having the process be fun throughout the entire time. You know, it is more about the journey than the end point at the end of the day. So yeah, just make sure you're having fun and you know, you've got a clear vision for what you want to get out of it, out of the experience.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Just
100%.
do things that you clearly want to do, but don't make it too easy. Of course, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that there has never been wiser words spoken by a more qualified group of people, surely. Thank you guys so much for your time today. I truly appreciate it. Of course, before we head out, I have to ask you guys, please let everyone know where they can find you on the interweb so they can continue to learn from you as well as support your work.
For me, Red F Manga on all socials. Yeah, you can support my story by reading it on Global Comics, Shrine Comics, and Manga Plus. We are halfway through 1 million on majority of all those platforms. And if you do want to support me personally, I only have 8 more copies left of Golden Mist Volume 1 before we've been sold out twice. So yeah, definitely support with that. And watch out for my newest one shot that's going to be on Viz. It is definitely going to be my best work. And yeah, I guess watch out for that. But Red F Manga on all socials. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can find me Kokujin Creates, Kokujin Creates, but with a K, all one word, on Instagram and Twitter and Blue Sky. But it doesn't matter. I'm on I'm on several different platforms. You can also follow our studio, Studio Maho, Maho. We have a website, we have a YouTube, we have a bunch of socials. You can read our stuff on our website directly. We drop it on there whenever, you know, we do hard copy drops first. So we'll drop like a month in advance. We'd say, hey, you know, here comes the hard copy. You can buy the hard copy, and then a month later, you can read it for free digitally on our website. So we are completely independently published right now. So we just stock what we got, and when we're out, we'll have to get some more. So make sure you get it before it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And you can follow me on all the social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky. It's Oh Hey DJ. That's OHHEY DJ on all those platforms, where I yap about anime, manga, video games, and what I'm working on and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time, or we'll see you on the next panel. That's right after this.